My name is David, and I have always been the kind of uncle that children adore. There is something about the way their eyes light up when they see me that fills my heart with warmth. I suppose it started when my older brother, Thomas, and his wife, Laura, began their family. They gave me 4 incredible nephews and nieces: Liam, who is 10 years old, Emma, who is 7, Jake, who is 4, and little Sophia, who is just 1. We live in a small coastal town in California, where the salty breeze from the ocean blends with the cries of seagulls overhead. It is a peaceful place, the kind of town where everyone knows each other, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore is a constant companion. The day of my wedding to Eva was one of the happiest days of my life. I can still picture it clearly in my mind. The ceremony took place outdoors, under the golden glow of a late afternoon sun. The sky was a brilliant blue, dotted with just a few fluffy white clouds. A gentle breeze carried the scent of the sea, and I felt like everything in my world was falling into place. Eva looked breathtaking in her flowing white dress, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders. She smiled at me as we stood together, ready to begin our new life. But what made the day truly special was the presence of my nephews and nieces. They were not just guests, they were part of the ceremony, and their involvement made my heart swell with pride and love. Liam, the eldest at 10, took his role very seriously. He walked down the aisle with the rings carefully balanced on a small satin pillow. His face was a mixture of concentration and pride, and I could not help but smile as I watched him. He has always been a responsible boy, the kind who looks out for his younger siblings without being asked. Next came Emma, my 7-year-old niece, who scattered rose petals along the aisle. She giggled as the soft pink petals floated to the ground, her blonde curls bouncing with every step. She looked like a little fairy, and the guests could not take their eyes off her. Then there was Jake, who is 4 years old. He marched ahead with a small flag in his hand, waving it proudly as if he were leading a parade. His mischievous grin lit up the scene, and I heard a few chuckles from the crowd. Finally, little Sophia, who is just 1, was wheeled down the aisle in a stroller decorated with flowers. She cooed and waved her tiny hands, completely unaware of the significance of the moment, but she stole the show nonetheless. As I stood at the altar, watching them come toward me, I felt my heart overflow with love. These children were not just my brother's kids, they were a part of me. I had been there for every milestone: Liam's first soccer game, Emma's first day of school, Jake's first steps, and Sophia's first smile. Being their uncle was one of the greatest joys of my life, and I knew that my bond with them would only grow stronger as time went on. I glanced at Eva, who stood beside me, and I saw her smiling too. She seemed enchanted by the scene, and I felt certain that she shared my love for these little ones. In that moment, I believed that our life together would be filled with happiness, surrounded by family and love. The ceremony itself was beautiful. The officiant spoke words of commitment and unity, and Eva and I exchanged our vows with tears in our eyes. When we were pronounced husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause, and I pulled Eva into a warm embrace. The children rushed toward us, their faces beaming with excitement. Liam handed me the rings with a proud nod. Emma hugged my legs tightly. Jake waved his flag even more enthusiastically, and Sophia clapped her tiny hands from her stroller. I knelt down and hugged each of them, feeling their small arms around me. The guests watched with smiles, some wiping away tears of their own. It was a perfect moment, one I would carry with me forever. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception, which was held in a nearby garden overlooking the ocean. The tables were decorated with white flowers and candles, and the sound of waves provided a soothing backdrop. The children ran around, laughing and playing, while Eva and I danced our first dance as husband and wife. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and I felt a deep sense of peace. I looked at Eva, her face glowing in the fading light, and I thought to myself that this was the beginning of something wonderful. I imagined our future together, a home filled with love, visits from my nephews and nieces, and perhaps even children of our own someday. I had no idea then how much our lives were about to change, but in that moment, everything felt right. As the night went on, the children stayed close to me. Liam told me stories about his latest soccer match. Emma showed me a dance she had learned. Jake tugged at my sleeve to show me a bug he had found, and Sophia fell asleep in my arms. I cherished every second of it. Eva watched from a distance, her expression warm but slightly reserved. I assumed she was just tired from the long day. After all, we had only been married for a few hours, and adjusting to our new life together would take time. I had no reason to think anything was wrong. Looking back now, I realized that there were small signs even then, hints of the challenges that lay ahead. But on that day, standing there with my new wife and my beloved nephews and nieces, I felt nothing but hope and joy. Life was good, and I believed it would only get better. The first few months of marriage to Eva were like a dream. We settled into our new home, a cozy house just a few blocks from the ocean in our small California coastal town. The house had a white picket fence, a small garden out front, and a big backyard where I imagined children playing someday. Eva and I spent our days unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and making the space our own. I loved the sound of the waves in the distance and the way the sunlight streamed through the windows in the morning. It felt like the perfect place to build a life together. We laughed as we hung pictures on the walls, cooked our first meals in the kitchen, and sat on the porch watching the sunset. Everything seemed to fall into place, and I felt grateful for the life we were starting. One of the best parts of those early months was how often my nephews and nieces visited us. Liam, Emma, Jake, and Sophia brought so much life into our home. Their laughter echoed through the rooms, and their energy was contagious. I loved having them around. Liam would sit with me and talk about his soccer games, his eyes lighting up as he described every goal. Emma would pull out her crayons and draw pictures on the kitchen table, proudly showing me her creations. Jake would run around the backyard, chasing imaginary monsters or begging me to push him on the swing I had built for them. And little Sophia, who was just learning to walk, would toddle toward me with her arms outstretched, giggling as I scooped her up. Those moments were pure joy to me. I had always been close to them, and now that I was married, I wanted them to feel like they were part of our new family. Eva seemed to enjoy their visits at first. She would smile as they ran around, and sometimes she even joined in their games. She baked cookies with Emma once, and I remember how proud Emma was to show me the slightly burnt treats they had made together. Eva would laugh when Jake told his silly stories, and she would coo over Sophia, commenting on how cute she was. I thought she loved having them around as much as I did. But as the weeks went by, I started to notice small changes in her behavior. Sometimes, when the children were being particularly loud, she would get quiet. Her smile would fade, and she would retreat to another room. I assumed she was just tired or needed a break. After all, for kids can be a handful, especially for someone who was not used to being around them all the time. I told myself that she would adjust with time. One sunny Saturday afternoon, everything changed. I was in the living room, reading a book, when my phone rang. It was Thomas, my brother. His voice sounded rushed, but cheerful. He explained that he and Laura had some important errands to run and asked if I could watch the kids for a few hours. I did not hesitate to say yes. I loved spending time with Liam, Emma, Jake, and Sophia, and I knew Thomas and Laura could use the break. They worked hard to provide for their family, and I was always happy to help. I told Thomas to bring the kids over whenever he was ready. As I hung up the phone, I turned to Eva, who was sitting on the couch across from me. I smiled and said, "Thomas and Laura need us to watch the kids for a few hours today. It'll be fun to have them over." I expected her to nod or smile back, but instead, she frowned. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she looked down at her hands. She did not say anything, but I could feel the tension in the air. The kids arrived an hour later, bursting through the door with their usual energy. Liam carried a soccer ball, eager to show me a new trick he had learned. Emma hugged me tightly, chattering about a song she had heard on the radio. Jake ran straight to the backyard, shouting about pirates and treasure, while Laura handed me Sophia, who was babbling happily in her arms. Thomas and Laura thanked me profusely, promising to be back before dinner. I waved them off with a smile, telling them not to worry. As they drove away, I turned back to the house, ready to spend the day with the kids. Eva stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. She watched the children with a distant look in her eyes. I asked her if she was okay, and she nodded quickly, forcing a small smile. "I'm fine," she said, her voice tight. "I just need to finish some things upstairs." Before I could say anything else, she turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the kids. The afternoon was a whirlwind of activity. I played soccer with Liam in the backyard, helped Emma draw a picture of the ocean, chased Jake around as he pretended to be a pirate, and rocked Sophia when she got fussy. The hours flew by, and I loved every minute of it. But as the sun began to set, I started to feel a flicker of unease. Eva had stayed upstairs most of the day, only coming down once to grab a glass of water. She barely spoke to the kids, and when she did, her tone was short. I tried to push the worry aside, telling myself that she was just having a bad day. Thomas and Laura would be back soon, and things would return to normal. But deep down, I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. The kids were happy and carefree, oblivious to the tension I was starting to sense. I looked at them, their faces glowing with joy, and I promised myself that I would talk to Eva later. I wanted us to be a team, to share this life together. I had no idea then how much our relationship was about to be tested. As the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, I sat on the porch with Sophia in my arms, waiting for Thomas and Laura to return. The other kids were inside, watching a movie, their laughter drifting out through the open window. I glanced up at the house and saw Eva standing at the bedroom window, looking down at us. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes that made my chest tighten. I told myself that we would work through whatever was bothering her. We were married now, and that meant facing challenges together. I believed in us. I believed in our future. But as I sat there, holding Sophia and listening to the distant sound of the ocean, I could not have predicted the storm that was about to hit our lives. The sun had set, and the evening air was cool as I sat on the porch with Sophia in my arms. She had fallen asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling with each soft breath. Inside the house, Liam, Emma, and Jake were sprawled out on the living room floor, watching a movie. Their laughter floated through the open window, a comforting sound against the quiet of the night. I kept glancing down the street, expecting to see Thomas and Laura's car pull up at any moment. They had promised to be back before dinner, but it was well past that now. A small knot of worry formed in my stomach, but I pushed it away. They were probably just delayed by traffic or some last-minute errand. I told myself there was no reason to panic. Eva was still upstairs. She had barely come down since the kids arrived, and I could feel the distance growing between us. I wanted to talk to her, to understand why she seemed so uncomfortable, but I decided to wait until Thomas and Laura returned. Once the kids were gone, we could sit down and figure things out. I rocked Sophia gently, humming a lullaby under my breath, when my phone rang. The sound startled me, and Sophia stirred in my arms. I shifted her carefully and pulled the phone from my pocket. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. My heart skipped a beat as I answered. "Hello," I said, my voice steady but uncertain. The voice on the other end was calm and formal, the kind of tone that sends chills down your spine. It was a police officer. He asked if I was David, the brother of Thomas. My mouth went dry, and I managed to say, "Yes, that's me." The officer paused for a moment, and then he delivered the news that would change my life forever. Thomas and Laura had been in a small plane crash. They had taken a short flight to a nearby city for a meeting, but the plane had gone down shortly after takeoff. There were no survivors. The officer's words echoed in my ears, but I could barely process them. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. I thanked him in a daze and hung up the phone, my hands trembling. For a moment, I just sat there, staring into the darkness. Sophia whimpered in her sleep, and I held her closer, tears burning in my eyes. How could this be real? Thomas and Laura were gone. My brother, who had always been my rock, and Laura, who had welcomed me into their family with open arms, they were gone. And their children, the 4 little ones I loved so much, were now orphans. I took a deep breath and stood up, carrying Sophia inside. The other kids looked up at me as I entered the living room. Liam noticed my expression first. "Uncle David, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice small. I forced a smile and said, "Nothing, champ. I just need to make a call. Keep watching your movie." He nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. The next few days were a blur of grief and chaos. Family members arrived from out of town, and the house was filled with tears and hushed conversations. I stayed by the kids' side as much as I could, holding them when they cried and answering their questions as best I could. Liam tried to be strong, but I found him sobbing in his room late one night. Emma kept asking when her parents would come back, her voice breaking my heart. Jake clung to me, confused and scared, while Sophia fussed constantly, sensing the tension around her. I barely slept, my mind racing with memories of Thomas and Laura and the weight of what had happened. After the funeral, the family gathered to discuss the future. Thomas and Laura's parents were there, their faces lined with grief. They loved their grandchildren dearly, but they were in their late 70s and struggling with health issues. They could not take on the responsibility of raising 4 young children. Other relatives offered to help, but no one could commit to taking all 4 kids. The room grew quiet, and I felt every eye turn to me. I looked at Liam, Emma, Jake, and Sophia, who were sitting together on the couch, their small faces filled with uncertainty. I knew what I had to do. That night, I sat down with Eva in our bedroom. The kids were asleep in the guest room, exhausted from the day. I took her hands in mine and looked into her eyes. "Eva," I said softly, "I want to take care of the children. They're my family, and I can't let them be split up or sent away. They need me, and I need to be there for them." She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. I waited, hoping she would understand. Finally, she nodded slowly. "If that's what you want, David," she said, her voice flat, "I'll support you." Relief washed over me, and I pulled her into a hug. "Thank you," I whispered. "We'll figure this out together." I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, but a sense of purpose. The kids were moving in with us permanently, and I was determined to give them the love and stability they needed. I believed Eva and I could handle this as a team. She had agreed to support me, and I took that as a sign that our marriage was strong enough to weather this storm. I had no idea how wrong I was. As I lay there in the dark, listening to the faint sound of the ocean outside, I felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to face it. These children were my family, and I would do anything for them. I just hoped Eva felt the same way. The days that followed were filled with adjustments. The kids brought their clothes, toys, and memories into our home, and I worked to create a routine for them. Eva helped with small tasks, like making meals or folding laundry, but I noticed she kept her distance from the children. She rarely spoke to them, and when she did, her tone was clipped. I told myself it was just the stress of the situation, that she needed time to adapt. I wanted to believe that we could build a new life together, one where the kids felt safe and loved. But as I watched Eva move through the house like a shadow, I began to feel a growing sense of unease. Something was shifting between us, and I was not sure how to fix it. The first few weeks after the children moved in were a whirlwind of emotion and effort. Our cozy house by the ocean, once quiet and orderly, was now filled with the sounds of life. Liam, Emma, Jake, and Sophia brought their belongings with them, and I worked hard to make space for everything. I turned the guest room into a bedroom for Liam and Jake, while Emma and Sophia shared a smaller room next to it. Their toys spilled across the living room floor, and their voices echoed through the halls. It was chaotic, but I loved it. These children were my family, and I was determined to give them a home where they could heal and grow. Every day was a new challenge. Liam, now 10, tried to be strong for his siblings. He helped me with chores and kept an eye on the younger ones, but I could see the pain in his eyes. Late at night, I would find him sitting on his bed, staring out the window at the ocean, tears streaming down his face. I would sit with him, holding him close, and tell him it was okay to cry. Emma, who was 7, struggled to understand why her parents were not coming back. She asked me the same question every day. "Uncle David, when will Mommy and Daddy come home?" Each time, I knelt down, looked into her big blue eyes, and explained as gently as I could that they were gone, but watching over her from heaven. Jake, at 4, was confused and clingy. He followed me everywhere, holding onto my hand or tugging at my shirt. And Sophia, just over a year old, cried more than she ever had before. She missed her parents' familiar touch, and I spent countless nights rocking her to sleep. I threw myself into caring for them. I woke up early to make breakfast, packed lunches for school, and drove Liam and Emma to their classes. After school, I helped with homework, played games in the backyard, and read bedtime stories. I changed Sophia's diapers, prepared her bottles, and sang to her when she fussed. It was exhausting, but I felt a deep sense of purpose. These children needed me, and I needed them. I wanted them to feel safe and loved, to know that they still had a family even after everything they had lost. The sound of their laughter, rare as it was in those early days, was my reward. Eva, on the other hand, seemed to drift further away with each passing day. She was physically present, but emotionally, she was somewhere else. She helped with practical tasks, like cooking dinner or washing dishes, but she rarely interacted with the children. When Liam tried to show her a drawing he had made, she gave him a quick nod and walked away. When Emma asked her to play, Eva said she was too tired. Jake once tried to climb into her lap, and she gently pushed him off, saying she needed space. Sophia's cries seemed to irritate her, and she would leave the room whenever the baby got fussy. I noticed all of this, but I told myself it was just an adjustment period. Losing Thomas and Laura had been hard on everyone, and I hoped Eva would come around with time. One evening, after a particularly long day, I decided to talk to her. The kids were finally asleep, and the house was quiet except for the faint sound of waves outside. I found Eva in the living room, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine in her hand. She stared at the wall, her face blank. I sat down beside her and took a deep breath. "Eva," I said gently, "I need to talk to you. This has been a tough time for all of us, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. I can't do this alone. The kids need you too. They need your love and support, and I need you by my side." I waited, hoping she would look at me, hoping she would say something to reassure me. She turned her head slowly, her eyes cold and distant. "David," she said, her voice low, "I married you. I didn't marry for children. I'm not their mother, and I don't want to be. This isn't the life I signed up for. I don't even know if I want kids of my own, let alone someone else's." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I stared at her, my mind racing. I had expected her to be hesitant, maybe even frustrated, but this was different. This was a rejection of everything I was trying to build. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Eva," I said, "when we got married, we promised to face everything together. Life doesn't always go as planned, but we can get through this. These kids are my family, and now they're our family. We can do this together, with love." She shook her head, her expression hardening. "I don't know if I can, David," she said. "I don't know if I want to." She stood up, leaving her glass on the table, and walked upstairs without another word. I sat there, alone in the dim light, my heart heavy. I had hoped that this conversation would bring us closer, that she would see how much the kids needed us. Instead, it had driven a wedge between us. I looked around the room, at the toys scattered on the floor and the drawings taped to the walls. This was my life now, and I was committed to it. I believed Eva would come around eventually. I had to believe that, because the alternative was too painful to consider. The next few days were tense. Eva moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding the children and speaking to me only when necessary. I kept hoping she would soften, that she would see the joy in Liam's smile or the sweetness in Emma's hugs. But she remained distant, and the gap between us grew wider. I focused on the kids, pouring all my energy into caring for them. I told myself that Eva just needed time, that she would adjust to our new reality. I wanted us to be a family, all of us together. But deep down, I could feel the strain building, and I began to wonder how long we could go on like this. The ocean outside roared in the distance, a constant reminder of the vastness of the world, and the growing distance between me and the woman I loved. The tension in our house grew thicker with each passing day. Eva's coldness toward the children was impossible to ignore, and it weighed heavily on me. I tried to bridge the gap, to bring her into our new family dynamic, but she seemed to retreat further with every attempt. I kept hoping she would change, that she would see how much Liam, Emma, Jake, and Sophia needed us. But deep down, I could feel the truth creeping in. Our marriage, which had started with so much promise, was unraveling, and I was powerless to stop it. The kids, still grieving the loss of their parents, deserved a home filled with love, and I was determined to give them that, even if it meant facing the challenges alone. One night, after another exhausting day, I decided to try talking to Eva again. The kids were asleep, their soft breathing filling the house with a rare sense of calm. I found Eva in the kitchen, staring out the window at the dark ocean beyond. Her arms were crossed, and her face was set in a hard line. I approached her carefully, my voice gentle. "Eva," I said, "we need to talk. I know this isn't what you expected when we got married, but these kids are here now. They're part of our lives, and I need you with me on this. We can make it work together." I waited, my heart pounding, hoping for a sign of understanding, a glimmer of the woman I had fallen in love with. She turned to face me, her eyes cold and resolute. "David," she said, her voice steady, I've tried to be okay with this, but I can't. I didn't sign up to raise 4 children. I married you because I wanted a life with you, not a life with someone else's kids. I'm not their mother, and I don't want to be. I can't do this." Her words cut through me like a knife. I opened my mouth to respond, to plead with her, but she held up a hand to stop me. "I've made up my mind," she said. "I'm leaving. When you come to your senses and realize you can't handle this, when you decide to let someone else take them, you know where to find me." Before I could say anything, she turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there, stunned and silent. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the front door closing. I stumbled out of bed and rushed downstairs, my heart sinking as I saw what I had feared. Eva was gone. Her suitcases, which had been packed and waiting by the door, were missing. A note sat on the kitchen table, written in her neat handwriting. It said, "I'm sorry, David. I can't do this. Take care of yourself." I stared at the note, my hands trembling, as the reality of her departure sank in. She had left me, left us, without even saying goodbye to the children. The house felt emptier than it ever had, and I was left to face the future alone with 4 grieving kids. I knew I had to tell them something. They deserved to know why Eva was not there anymore. I gathered them in the living room, my heart heavy as I looked into their confused faces. Liam, always the perceptive one, spoke first. "Uncle David, where's Aunt Eva?" he asked, his voice small. I took a deep breath and knelt down in front of them. "Eva had to leave," I said gently. "She wasn't ready to be part of our family right now. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll get through this together." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she whispered, "Doesn't she like us?" I pulled her into a hug, my voice breaking as I said, "It's not about you, sweetheart. She just needed to go. But I love you, and that's what matters." The days that followed were some of the hardest I had ever faced. The kids were dealing with yet another loss, and I had to be their rock. Liam withdrew, spending more time alone in his room. Emma clung to me, afraid I might leave too. Jake acted out, throwing tantrums and refusing to listen. Sophia, too young to understand, cried more than ever. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but I refused to give up. I cooked meals, helped with homework, and tucked them into bed each night. I read stories to Jake until he fell asleep, rocked Sophia until she calmed down, and sat with Liam and Emma as they poured out their fears and sadness. One night, as I sat in the living room after the kids were asleep, Liam came downstairs. He stood in the doorway, his face pale and tear-streaked. I opened my arms, and he ran to me, burying his face in my chest. "Uncle David," he said, his voice muffled, "are you going to leave us too?" I held him tightly, tears streaming down my own face. "No, Liam," I said firmly. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. We have each other, and that's enough." He looked up at me, his eyes searching mine, and then he nodded. "Okay," he said softly. "We'll be okay." Those words, spoken with such quiet strength, gave me the courage I needed to keep going. I was alone now, a single man raising 4 children, but I was not truly alone. I had Liam, Emma, Jake, and Sophia, and they had me. Together, we would face whatever came next. The ocean roared outside, a constant presence in our lives, and I felt a flicker of hope. Eva was gone, and my heart was broken, but I was determined to build a life for these kids. They were my family, and I would never abandon them. As I held Liam close, I made a silent promise to them all. No matter how hard it got, I would be there, and we would find our way through the storm together. The years that followed Eva's departure were a test of strength and resilience. Raising Liam, Emma, Jake, and Sophia on my own was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most rewarding. Our small house by the ocean became a sanctuary, a place where we built a new life out of the ashes of loss. I learned to navigate the complexities of parenthood, balancing work, school schedules, and the emotional needs of 4 growing children. There were nights when I fell into bed exhausted, my body aching and my mind racing, but I never regretted my decision. These kids were my family, and I was determined to give them the love and stability they deserved. Liam, who was 10 when Eva left, grew into a responsible teenager. He took on more than any child should have to, helping me with his younger siblings and keeping our little household running. I watched him excel at soccer, cheering from the sidelines at every game, and I helped him with his homework late into the night. He became a protector, always looking out for Emma, Jake, and Sophia. Emma, who was 7 at the time, discovered a passion for music. I saved up to buy her a second-hand guitar, and she spent hours practicing, filling the house with soft melodies. Her gentle nature shone through in everything she did, and I was proud of the compassion she showed toward others. Jake, who was 4, was a bundle of energy. He kept me on my toes with his endless curiosity and mischievous antics, but I loved watching him grow. I taught him how to ride a bike in the backyard, and his triumphant grin as he pedaled on his own was a memory I would cherish forever. Sophia, just a year old when she came to live with me, saw me as her father. I was there for her first words, her first steps, and every milestone that followed. She brought light into our home with her infectious laughter and bright spirit. There were challenges, of course. Money was tight, and I worked long hours at my job as a mechanic to make ends meet. I learned to stretch every dollar, cooking simple meals and mending clothes instead of buying new ones. There were nights when the kids cried for their parents, and all I could do was hold them and promise that we would be okay. Liam struggled with anger at times, frustrated by the unfairness of it all, and I spent countless hours talking him through his feelings. Emma had nightmares, waking up in tears and calling for her mother, and I would sit by her bed until she fell back asleep. Jake tested boundaries, pushing me to my limits, and Sophia's tantrums as a toddler left me exhausted. But through it all, we grew closer. We became a team, relying on each other to get through the tough days. About 4 years after Eva left, I met Rachel. She was a nurse at the local clinic, kind and patient, with a warm smile that put everyone at ease. We met by chance when I brought Sophia in for a checkup, and we struck up a conversation. Over time, we became friends, and then something more. Rachel was different from Eva. She loved the kids from the moment she met them, and they took to her quickly. She helped Emma with her guitar chords, played soccer with Liam, chased Jake around the backyard, and read stories to Sophia. She brought a sense of calm and joy into our lives, and I began to feel something I had not felt in years: hope. After a year of dating, I asked her to move in with us, and she said yes. The kids were thrilled, and I felt like our family was finally whole again. Together, Rachel and I raised the children with love and care. She became a second parent to them, and they started calling her mom in their own time. Liam, now 14, grew into a confident young man, excelling in school and sports. Emma, at 11, performed in her first school talent show, her guitar playing bringing tears to my eyes. Jake, at 8, settled into a bright and curious boy, always asking questions and exploring the world around him. Sophia, now 5, started kindergarten, her backpack nearly as big as she was, and she came home every day with stories of her adventures. Rachel and I worked as a team, supporting each other through the ups and downs. We celebrated birthdays, attended school events, and took family trips to the beach, building memories that would last a lifetime. The years passed, and the pain of losing Thomas, Laura, and Eva began to fade, replaced by the love and strength of our family. I watched the kids grow and thrive, and I felt a deep sense of pride. They had faced more hardship than any child should, but they were resilient. Liam became a leader, Emma a dreamer, Jake an explorer, and Sophia a ray of sunshine. Rachel and I grew closer, our bond strengthened by the life we had built together. The ocean outside our home remained a constant presence, its waves a reminder of the challenges we had overcome and the peace we had found. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Rachel, watching the kids play in the yard, I reflected on our journey. Liam was kicking a soccer ball with Jake, Emma was strumming her guitar, and Sophia was chasing seagulls, her laughter ringing through the air. Rachel reached for my hand, and I squeezed it gently. "We've done well, haven't we?" she said, her voice soft. I nodded, my heart full. "Yes, we have," I said. "We've built something beautiful." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and I felt a profound gratitude. Life had tested us, but we had come through it stronger, together as a family. 10 years had passed since Eva walked out of our lives, and so much had changed. I stood in a small cafe in our coastal California town, waiting for a work client. The sun streamed through the windows, casting warm light across the wooden tables. My hair had a few more gray strands now, and my hands bore the marks of years spent fixing cars and raising 4 children. I was flipping through some papers, my mind focused on the meeting ahead, when a familiar voice broke through my thoughts. "David, is that you?" it said, soft and hesitant. I looked up, and there she was, Eva, standing in front of me. Time had been kind to her. She was still beautiful, her dark hair pulled back, her face lined with faint traces of the years. But there was something in her eyes, a mix of regret and curiosity, that caught me off guard. I stood up, offering a polite smile. "Hello, Eva," I said, gesturing for her to sit. She hesitated for a moment before settling into the chair across from me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. She looked at me, her gaze searching my face as if trying to find answers to questions she had not yet asked. Finally, she broke the silence. "I always hoped you'd come find me after I left," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I thought you'd realize you couldn't handle it, that you'd give the kids up and come back to me." Her words hung in the air, and I felt a pang of sadness, not for myself, but for her. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Eva," I began, my voice steady. "I know you didn't marry a man with 4 children. Life threw us a curveball, and it wasn't what you planned. But those kids needed me. When Thomas and Laura died, I couldn't abandon them. They became my world, and I became theirs. You weren't there when I needed you most. Imagine if it had been me who faced a crisis, an illness, or an accident. Would you have left me then, too? Your love, it turns out, was only for the good times. It couldn't withstand the hard ones." I spoke gently, without anger, because I had long since made peace with what had happened. Eva opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a burst of laughter interrupted us. I looked over her shoulder, and my face lit up with a radiant smile. Entering the cafe were Liam, Emma, Jake, and Sophia, now teenagers and young adults, accompanied by Rachel. Liam, at 18, led the group with confidence, his broad shoulders and steady gait a testament to the man he had become. Emma, 15, carried her guitar case, her blonde hair catching the light as she smiled. Jake, 13, still had that mischievous spark in his eyes, his energy barely contained as he chatted with his siblings. Sophia, 10, ran ahead, her face glowing with excitement. "Dad," she called out, her voice bright. "Did we surprise you?" She threw her arms around me, and I hugged her back, laughing. "You certainly did, my love," I said, my heart swelling with joy. I stood up, turning back to Eva, who watched the scene unfold with wide eyes. "Eva," I said gently, "I have to go now. My family and I have a celebration to attend. I wish you well, and I hope you find the kind of unconditional love I've found." I gave her a final nod, then walked toward my family. Rachel met me with a warm smile, slipping her hand into mine. The kids gathered around, their voices overlapping as they told me about their day. Liam had just won a soccer scholarship, Emma was preparing for a music recital, Jake had aced a science project, and Sophia had made a new friend at school. I listened, my heart full, as we left the cafe together. Eva stayed behind, her eyes following us as we stepped into the sunlight. I could feel her gaze, and I knew she was seeing what she had lost. She had walked away from a chance to be part of something extraordinary, and now she saw the family I had built without her. As we walked down the street, the ocean sparkling in the distance, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. There had been moments of doubt and hardship, times when I wondered if I could keep going. But every challenge had strengthened the bonds between us. Liam, Emma, Jake, and Sophia had grown into remarkable people, and Rachel had become my partner in every sense of the word. We reached the beach, where we had planned a small family celebration. The kids ran ahead, kicking off their shoes and racing toward the water. Rachel and I sat on a blanket, watching them play. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped an arm around her. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she said softly. I nodded, my eyes on the kids as they splashed in the waves. "Yes, we have," I replied. "And I wouldn't change a thing." The sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the scene, and I felt a deep gratitude settle over me. Life had surprised me with unexpected turns, but it had also given me a family I cherished beyond words. True love, the kind I had found with Rachel and the kids, had carried us through the darkest times and into a future filled with light. As the waves crashed against the shore and the kids' laughter filled the air, I knew that this was where I was meant to be. Our journey had not been easy, but it had been worth it. This was my family, my home, and my forever.